As many of you know, the rule of the Senate, generally speaking, is you have to have 60 votes in order to get anything passed. And that is what makes it hard to get things done sometimes. But there's a major exception in the law that Shannon mentioned called reconciliation, that if it's set up just right, then a bare majority can pass legislation. But in order to get that set up right, you have to have this trifecta. Not only that, you have to also have enough members on both sides of the Capitol, House and Senate, to vote for a budget resolution to set it up. And then, in case you're wondering why the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is largely expiring, is you can't go beyond 10 years with tax changes from those kind of bills. And so that's why we have the situation, because Tax Cuts and Jobs Act was set up under this budget reconciliation system. So we know that the president, the new incoming president, very much wants to get things moving with tax changes and extending those expiring provisions within 100 days. But that's going to depend on, number one, that we do get a new House that has Republican control. Number two, all those Republicans, or almost all of them, agree with the budget resolution that sets it up. And if that happens, then yes, it can happen that the Senate can pass this without 60 votes. But the alternative to that is that you can't get a budget resolution passed, and you have to try to do it through a bipartisan tax bill. And that means 60 votes. It also means that you have to reach out to the other side and get some buy-in from both sides of the aisle, and somebody is not going to like everything that's in that bill. And it makes it a lot harder, and it might take a lot longer to do it. Instead of being done in 100 days, it might take all year long, like it did in 2017 to get it done, or it could extend into the second year. Keep in mind that the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act provisions don't expire till the end of 2025, and tax returns for 2026 aren't filed until early 2027. So actually, we have until early 2027 to take care of this problem. Although nobody likes to have all this uncertainty hanging over our heads, very much like to see this taken care of early. But somebody who doesn't, if we are going bipartisan, somebody who's holding out for their cooperation can say, I've got time on my side because I don't have to act until you approve the bill. And so if it turns out that the Republicans can get this trifecta, it can move pretty quickly. But don't count on it happening that way. It didn't happen that quickly with Obama and the Affordable Care Act. It didn't happen that quickly in 2017 with the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and it didn't happen that quickly in 2012. It took till 2022 for President Biden to get the Inflation Reduction Act. So chances are it's going to take a little bit longer, and a little bit harder to do, even if you do get the trifecta. And if you don't get the trifecta, it's going to be hard, and it's a great thing that we have relationships on both sides of the aisle, because we'll be talking to our friends on both sides to get our agenda done.
Well, I told you they really gamed it out, and Evan's gamed it out till 2027. And, you know, I think you make a great point on the importance of starting early, because you can get mired into unforeseen circumstances. So, Helen, in terms of how this looks in the House and how it looks in the Senate, do you see differences in how this may go forward?
Well, the key is that the process has to start in the House first. So you have to get, so you would think, kind of as you were saying, if the Republicans do end up getting the House, does that make it easier for them to start the process? Possibly, except, you know, one of the things they have to decide that they're going to agree to do is spend $4 trillion just to keep the existing tax provisions alive. That's a much bigger chunk than the $1 trillion that they had to do in 2017. So I feel like that's going to be a hurdle. You've got a different dynamic in the House Republican Party. Can they do it by themselves like they were able to do in 2017? I don't know. I think you've got these other barriers that are pretty big. But they do have to get the ball rolling first.
Mm-hmm. So, taken all together, Evan, do you think it's going to be challenging for incoming President Trump to extend these provisions of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act?
I think it is, because again, it cost $1.5 trillion to pass that bill the first time in 2017. Making those provisions permanent is expected to be $4 trillion. As Helen just mentioned, the question is, are the Republicans and the Democrats, if they decide to vote for that, willing to just add that to the national debt, or are they going to want to try to offset it? Now, there are some kind of offsets that could be used to help pay for that, but that's a lot of money to be added, and it could be really tough. First thing that the president's going to want to do, though, is probably extend those provisions that are set to expire. But as you all know, he's added some other things, such as not taxing tips, not taxing Social Security, and a few other things, and all those cost money. Maybe we can raise the money through other means, and we'll just have to see.
Yeah, and there are other things that we'd like to see as well. So in terms of offsetting the costs, Helen, Republicans and the Trump campaign have talked about some possibilities.
One thing that the Trump campaign did talk about was tariffs, raising tariffs, and so I think that's going to be part of the conversation. I do think there's a challenge there. It brings a whole another dynamic of possible concerns with the economy. So, but to that end, as Evan, you're saying, is they're going to have work bipartisanly, which means this issue of paying for things has to come back up. The ugly 11, I think we're going to continue to see. I think there's going to be other creative ideas that may come up, and they aren't a tax, but they're going to be. So we're going to have to really be on the lookout, playing defense on issues that we haven't even thought of today, right now. It's going to be interesting. Lots of stuff is going to be thrown out there that we're going to have to be ready for.
And speaking of lots of stuff, so Evan, I mentioned that there's the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and NAR's agenda there, but our agenda for tax reform goes broader than that. You want to speak to that? And
Yes.
I'm curious, do you think that the political composition of the House is going to make a difference on what we can get done?
We'd like to take this opportunity when tax reform is up and being debated to talk about how do we increase the supply of homes for sale, and other things such as trying to create more housing and things like that. Also, we want to make sure we protect the deduction that 9 out of 10 realtors can get through Section 199 Cap A of the code for qualified business income. Some of the things will be easier to do because of a trifecta if we do have it, such as the 199, and fighting against some of these ugly 11 tax hikes will be a lot easier too. Other things would be more challenging. We may not get as much support from Republicans as we would from Democrats on some of the supply ideas. For More Homes on the Market Act, which would double the exemption level for capital gains on the sale of a home, for example, we have a lot more support on the Democratic side than we do on the Republican side. So that would be a little bit tougher to do with the makeup that we're talking about. So it all depends, but we're going to be doing our darndest to try to get our agenda inserted to this tax reform debate no matter what.
So I'm hearing a Democratic House could potentially offer some opportunity for some compromise on some of these supply and production items?
Yeah, I think so. Some of the supply items, we've seen innovative ideas from Democrats as well as Republicans. But like I say, More Homes on the Market Act, the problem is more real in the blue states than it is the red states. And so we have a lot more work to do among Republicans to get that particular legislation passed.
Wow. So, Helen, I'm getting the sense that we're going to have our work cut out for us, regardless who controls the House. What do you
Yeah, absolutely.
have to say on that?
I mean, it's going to be a different debate than the last time. There's going to be issues like we've been working on for years that we're going to keep floating, see who can bite, see what if there's openings. There's going to be issues we haven't even thought of yet that we may have to be playing defense on. So yes, it's going to be a long year. I want to give a forward thank you to the FPCs. As Shannon mentioned, you've been incredible laying the groundwork this past year with Congress about supply issues, about the impact on taxes. And so thank you again, because we're really going to need you in 2025 too, as the ball gets rolling.
Yeah. So, you've heard it. We've got still some question marks out there in terms of what the House will look like, whether we will have a trifecta from the White House through both chambers of the House. But however you look at it, we have a very robust book of advocacy business that we will be pushing in the coming year. And tax, we're going to start January with a great focus on tax. When we have Advocacy Week in January, we are going to focus our policy forum on these issues so that we can begin preparing all of Washington, all of our partners to work with us in advocating this agenda. So I